Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Clarissa Dunn, joining you from Wellington's Michael Fowler Centre for Eroica, a New Zealand Symphony Orchestra concert with special guest conductor Miguel Harth-Bedoya. Today, painful spectacles I have witnessed. Remember Parihaka reflects Anthony Ritchie's thoughts and feelings about these shameful events. The slow opening is peaceful like a sunrise. Flutes and oboes announce a chant-like theme based on a song composed at the time of the incident. This Māori theme alternates with a more European-sounding theme on solo violin, accompanied by an Irish drum. At the heart of the piece, the various melodic ideas come together over a grinding, relentless bass, building to a climax. In a short postlude, the piece of the opening is suggested, but now it is tinged with sadness and a slight uneasy feeling. That applause for the concertmaster for this concert, Donald Armstrong. Anthony Ritchie wrote this piece originally for the Dunedin Symphony when he was composer in residence in 1994, so it was first performed that year. Anthony learned more about the events at Parihaka by reading Dick Smith's book, Ask That Mountain, the story of Parihaka, if you're interested in more details. And here's Miguel Harth-Bedoya to lead the orchestra in Anthony Ritchie's Remember Parihaka. Anthony Ritchie's Remember Parihaka, performed by the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra and conducted by Miguel Harth-Bedoya, who now say a few words from the stage.
Kia ora. Good afternoon. It's great to be back making music live with all of you, because the purpose of great compositions is for us to play, but to share it with you. We just played Remember Parihaka by Anthony Ritchie, who celebrates his 60th anniversary this year. And for the last 25 years that I've been coming to New Zealand, one of the things that gives me the most pleasure is working with new works by living New Zealand composers. And the composers are the most important element in the equation of music making, because without their creation, we wouldn't have something to play and something for you to hear. And today, we talk about this quite often, but the power of music, but it's true that the power of music is what unites us all. Many times we don't have to explain the music, music does it for itself. And I also want to acknowledge patrons that are coming for the first time to hear the New Zealand Symphony. We want to make sure that it's your very best first-time experience listening to a symphony orchestra, to your very own New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. As we move into the program with Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, let's think about this young man in his early 30s who was already suffering and struggling because of his loss of hearing, and struggled with the world, but was able to give us amazing, uplifting music, music that lifts our spirit. And I hope that with that tone, we can send you back home with your spirits in a very high point. Thank you for being with us today, and enjoy the concert.
If you've ever had to let go of a long-held ambition, then you have something in common with the Finnish composer Sibelius, who abandoned his dream of becoming a violinist after failing an audition for the Vienna Philharmonic. But he wasn't suited to performance. He had a nervous temperament, and he was developing a terrible alcoholism, which made him shake and made playing very difficult. So this concerto is seen as both a farewell to the instrument and to his violin concerto. And it is one of the most thrilling, vigorous and technically demanding works ever to be written for the violin. Tonight we're going to hear the Concertmaster, Vesa-Matti Leppänen, play this wonderful Sibelius violin concerto, a work from a composer from his homeland. And it was a work, too, that Sibelius probably wouldn't have gotten through if he didn't have the help of his wife, Aino. While he composed this work, he would disappear for long stretches of time, sometimes several days, on binge drinking episodes, and his wife would have to go and search for him on the streets and bars of Helsinki. So it was thanks to a lot of support from his very patient wife that Sibelius was able to create this extraordinary concerto. It begins with a heartbreaking cry on the solo violin, and underneath that, muted violins. And that applause for Vesa-Matti Leppänen to play this Sibelius violin concerto with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Miguel Harth-Bedoya. Notoriously challenging and dramatic. That was Sibelius's Violin Concerto, played by Vesa-Matti Leppänen and the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Miguel Harth-Bedoya. Vesa was born in Finland, same place as the composer Sibelius, but moved to New Zealand in 2000 and has been concertmaster of the orchestra ever since, and it's great to see him in the spotlight again today. What a brilliant job he did of that extremely difficult concerto, which manages to achieve a remarkable balance between virtuosity and substance. Vesa returning to the stage to accept the applause, hearty applause from the audience here in the Michael Fowler Centre, who must know and love Vesa-Matti Leppänen very much. In 2005, Vesa-Matti Leppänen led the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra on its European and Japanese tour, and again in 2010, including unforgettable performances in the Musikverein in Vienna and the Lucerne Festival Hall. And on both those tours, he also featured as a soloist. And the orchestra manager bringing out flowers for Vesa, celebrating that stellar performance. And it looks like Vesa is headed towards the violin section and handing over his flowers to violinist Lucien Rizos, who retires today after more than 46 years with the orchestra. He looks very happy with himself and he's quite a shy man. I don't think he's used to all this spotlight. What a nice thing to do. Vesa-Matti Leppänen returning to the stage to accept yet more applause. Vesa kindly stepped in for Augustine Hadley, who was unable to make it to New Zealand due to COVID-19. It's time now for a short break. After the interval, you'll hear the work that changed the symphony forever, Beethoven's Eroica Symphony No. 3 in E-flat. During the interval, we're going to hear more from Vesa-Matti Leppänen and go behind the scenes to talk to the orchestra's music librarian, Chris Turner, about his role in getting the music we hear the orchestra performing into the concert hall. I spoke with them both last week. Vesa-Matti Leppänen first performed the Sibelius Violin Concerto with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra back in 2005, with John Storgård conducting, and then again in 2009 under Pietari Inkinen. Today marked his third time playing it with the orchestra. I asked Vesa if his view of the concerto had changed in that time.
Yes, maybe, at least in terms of, 10 years, 15 years. It's a long time ago. I'm older now. So, yes, I'm sure I've played probably a little bit differently to, let's say, to 2005.
Faster to get it over with, or slower to enjoy it?
Yeah. No, I think it's obviously been always been one of the concertos that, every Finnish violinist has to play it anyway. But I have played it through my life, really. More or less, and I think it's one of those things that it grows with you when you play it.
Does being Finnish bring something to this?
Well, it's interesting when you listen to early recordings of it, also by some Finnish violinists. Styles have changed a lot. Even just style of playing has changed a lot since early 1900s. But also, I think what's happened since, let's say, 50s, when there were vinyls and, recordings in, let's say, in Moscow and recording in Berlin and recording somewhere in America, those players might have never heard of each other or heard each other playing. And these days, of course, there's so much influence, So I would say that being a Finnish violinist playing a Finnish violin concerto, it's sort of diminishing. It's not important anymore. It might have been maybe 50 years ago. But for me, when I play it, I don't often listen to Sibelius Violin Concerto played by, let's say, at home, played by someone else. But it's very enjoyable when I play with someone as a soloist in front of us.
So Hilary Hahn, for example, in the 2010
yeah,
European
exactly.
tour?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, so exactly, those moments are really quite precious for me. And it would have been wonderful to have Augustine here.
He was the original soloist.
Exactly.
Coming from Germany? Where was he based?
In America, I think,
America.
yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, it would have been absolutely amazing to have him. We all know he's a wonderful violinist. But I guess the sort of funny part of this whole situation is that in the first performance of the revised version that now is being played commonly, the soloist that Sibelius wanted to play his concerto wasn't available, so the leader of the orchestra had to do it. So here we are. It's basically repeating that. So it's as authentic as it comes, really.
Oh, I think you do yourself a discredit. What's it like standing up in front of the orchestra as soloist when you know all these people so well? Is it hard, or do you find it quite liberating?
A bit of both, I think. It's wonderful. My colleagues are amazing. I mean, have always been being supporting players, and I think. There's always the first rehearsal. It's more about the connection with the conductor, you know, who's conducting, and then getting warmed up with the orchestra and get things going. But when after the first rehearsal, it just gets easier and easier. But especially with players that you know, like in this case.
Sibelius's first love was the violin. He had hoped to become a professional violinist. Do you think his passion for the instrument is obvious in this concerto?
Yes, I think so. There are no other concertos by him, as an example. So what is interesting, though, is that why did he write something that was basically unplayable in the first instance? But because he knew the limitations of the instrument. And then what happened from that version to the one that we now play, which is just structurally and otherwise just perfect, and it's just beautiful. Very symphonic. So it's interesting what was going in his mind. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely think that he certainly loved the piece.
Can you hear Finland's landscape in this music?
Yeah, absolutely. The first tutti, even when the concerto starts, it's icy cold. I can just feel it. And the violin goes between the two notes, F natural, A natural, goes with the G natural, just striking in the middle. It's just beautiful. Definitely very, very Scandinavian feel to it. And then the first tutti after the first violin cadenza, it's just, you can just feel the wind and the trees, and yeah, it definitely has that feel throughout the piece.
So what are the particular challenges for you as the soloist in this work? The last movement?
Oh yeah, it is still out there. It's just really tricky at times technically. I guess one of the things that, because it's the first movement is quite long, it's quite symphonic, and what happens when you play a solo, it's quite easy to get sort of overwhelmed of the orchestra. Especially in this piece, it has a really important part. It's not simply accompanying the solo. There are many, many passages where the violin is not the leading line at all, or the most important. So those kind of moments can surprise you when you haven't played it often. And the other part, of course, which is challenging, is that when you are not a soloist all the time, getting the routines and the repetitions, and you don't have that. So it's always a bit of a question mark. Can I still do it, kind of thing, So yeah, that's the other part that makes it possibly more challenging.
And is the solo voice in your mind a human voice?
I was told to sing when I play in my mind. Most of the time I try to do that. In fact, that's one way to completely forget yourself and the technical difficulties. So yeah, sometimes.
Now I'd like to introduce Chris Turner, who is the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra's music librarian. Now I expect this year, with its COVID-19 response, has thrown a huge number of spanners in the works for you. But we're going to explore that a little bit later. I'd like to know what you would do in any normal year. What is the music librarian's job?
Our foremost function is to make sure that the orchestra has all of the sheet music that they need to perform whatever programs that we've put in front of them, basically. On a simple aspect, that means just sourcing music and putting on the music stands, but then we obviously deal with a lot of the technical markings that the orchestra require, so the string players' bowings and all that kind of thing.
So that doesn't come in the score?
No, generally not. I mean, some composers, like maybe Stravinsky, he puts some bowing markings in, but particularly earlier repertoire tends to come without any of those things. So we work with Vesa and the concertmasters and the other string principals to get those markings sorted, get them out to all of the other string players. I mean, one of the other big aspects that we look at when we're preparing scores is we're really generally looking for any obvious mistakes in them.
Because not all editions are born equal.
That is absolutely correct, yes. You know, there are periods of time and countries where you end up with, you know, a lot of mistakes due to the technological processes they were using to create the parts. So,
and research too, things get revised, don't
yeah,
they?
absolutely. So we spend quite a lot of time making sure that, you know, what the players have got in front of them is actually what the conductor's expecting them to have, and so that there's not going to be any kind of questions in rehearsal about which version of the text that we should be looking at in that particular situation. So, and of course we always work with the conductors themselves on that, so sometimes we have to make judgments, but then there are some things where we think actually this is really a conductor's decision, so we pass that question on to them for answers, as it were. So,
where do you normally get the music from? Do you have scores in your library?
Absolutely, yeah. NZSO has got a very large sheet music library just down the road from here. When we moved it was about 20 metric tons of sheet music. It's large, it takes up a very big room. So it's got all of the orchestra's kind of history of performance. It's got some really interesting things from New Zealand composers that are probably one of a kind. But the key thing for us is that really because it retains all of the orchestra's markings, it means that when they come to play the next time, that they have that kind of history of performance within those scores in front of them, and we're not having to start from scratch every time, which is, you know, helpful and time-saving for us. So
if it's not in your library and you have to presumably either buy or hire it from somewhere else.
Absolutely, yes. So if we can buy something that we don't have, then we generally will do, for the obvious reasons that the orchestra, we mark it up for them and then they have it for the next time they want to play it. And then there are some works which tend to be kind of more recent works, which are only available for rental from libraries around the world. And so in those cases we source from Australia, from America, from the UK and most of Europe, Japan I think as well, yeah. So it really depends on the work in question, and so those things get shipped into us and we use them and then send them back.
So I guess there are issues about availability. You know, if someone else has hired that library's parts, so you have to go to another library. There's a lot of planning and advance notice needed to order and get them here and then return them.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we look to have kind of everything sort of planned, you know, at least 6 months in advance, just to make sure that we've got time to get things here and that there's not going to be any last minute surprises. Generally speaking, most music rental libraries are really good about making extra sets if other orchestras have got things on, so it's not really an issue we face, but yeah, the planning side of it is something that we try to keep rolling, you know, so that everything is here as soon as we can get it here for the musicians to work from.
And they don't just send you a PDF and say, here you go, print off as many copies as you like, because this is somebody's intellectual property you're dealing with. That's
absolutely right, yes. It's something that many of the orchestra libraries in the world, we're working with the publishers about how do we actually progress into a digital age with this stuff, so that we can, you know, eliminate some of the carbon footprint of the industry in terms of the shipping of music. But there's always a desire to keep hold of these kind of beautiful old sets of paper parts and to reuse these. So, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your own background in music, did you have any experience playing in an orchestra before you came to be a librarian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I studied clarinet at the Royal College of Music in London, so did all the usual kind of conservatoire orchestras and that kind of thing, and then kind of my interest in kind of orchestral music kind of really, I kind of took it to the next kind of really geeky level, as it were, and kind of pursued this as a profession. I mean, basically what we do all day is we spend time with scores and parts and really researching and getting into that really interesting side of things. So for me, this is a really interesting career to pursue.
Outside of the logistics of getting music in and out and getting the markings sorted, the planning and the preparation of scores, are there other things a little bit outside of the box that you might have to deal with? Do you have to advise the orchestra on any issues? Copyright or costs of scores?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we obviously do all the budgeting for the music library for rentals and purchases and all that kind of thing. One of the big issues that we face at the moment is around licensing, and particularly as we start to move into a more digital sphere, there are kind of multiple tiers of licensing that we require for all of these performances. So we source all of those and get all those contracts signed. So that's increasingly becoming a larger and larger part of the job as we look to really live stream as many of our concerts as we can. So yeah.
And with the tech side of things, because we're heading towards that in our conversation now, do you envisage the orchestra using technology such as iPads to read from instead of paper scores? You've got this library, this vast collection of music, but will there be a period of time, do you think, before they have to convert to more modern technologies?
I mean, look, actually a lot of our players are already using iPads. They use them as practice devices when they're on the road touring, so they don't have to, schlep around 6 programs worth of music. They take an iPad, and it means they've got all of that music they want to practice at their fingertips. So in that sense, the future's here already. In terms of the actual orchestra using it, there's a long way to go in terms of the technology, making that kind of reliable for a whole symphony orchestra to use.
What can happen when it goes wrong?
The music turns off.
Right,
and the one great advantage of paper is that doesn't happen.
No, a big breeze maybe, but not likely in a concert hall.
Absolutely, yes. And there's work being done on an international level between many of the orchestra libraries and many of the music publishers around, what that kind of future looks like.
Imagine you're marking up. You could mark up one digital copy and have it appear on everyone else's.
You sure could, absolutely, and that's one of the things that's being discussed. But yes, so at the moment it's just the kind of thing that people are starting to experiment with a little bit, and I think we'll most likely see it kind of in chamber music first. I mean, I know some chamber groups are really already starting to move down that road. Orchestras tend to be a little conservative in these kinds of technologies because it affects so many people, and if something goes wrong, it's really, really hard to put right quickly. So we tend to be a little bit more on the conservative side with that kind of technology management for the orchestra. But yeah, that gives a rough an overview, I think, of where we are with that.
Yeah, fantastic. So you hinted before that this year has been a little bit exceptional, especially in the delivery of music. We are in the middle of COVID-19, and the NZSO's response has been a lot of improvising and impromptu, trying to deliver music to audiences in new and socially distanced ways, and that has of course meant a lot of live streaming and a lot of performances in quick succession, some smaller scale, some larger scale. How have you coped with delivering a lot more music through the channels?
Oh, look, it's been a difficult year for everywhere in the world, and I think I speak for everyone in the organisation saying, that we feel very kind of fortunate to be here in New Zealand in the situation where we're really able to make the music that we're making. There are plenty of other orchestras around the world which are not in a similar situation to us right now, and so we feel really lucky from that point of view.
So you don't complain too often then, Chris, when things get tough?
Try not to. Look, it's certainly been very, very busy, particularly actually as we progressed down the alert levels and we started getting to this kind of phase where we're having kind of multiple contingency planning for different programs. The last couple of weeks we've found particularly challenging because we've been obviously preparing for multiple different scenarios in terms of what we're going to deliver to the New Zealand public.
Well, for example, you very quickly pulled together the Harikoa Ake event, perhaps the first large live orchestral event in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very, very quick one for us, and we were very fortunate in that our publisher partners in Australia and Europe were able to get music to us so quickly for that. I mean, we had stuff here within 4 days, I think, of us asking for it, which was really amazing, and it meant we were able to deliver all those beautiful songs with Simon O'Neill that we otherwise just wouldn't have been able to get hold of. So, yeah, that was definitely a highlight of this year for me.
In the second half, we're going to hear Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, this being the 250th anniversary of his birth. The NZSO performed complete Beethoven cycles in symphony cycles in 2014 with Pieter Inkinen, and then again last year with Eero de Waard. Do you think an orchestra can play too much Beethoven? Are you sick of it?
No, I'm not sick of it. I think it's almost impossible to be sick of it.
How? What is it that makes it impossible to be not sick of Beethoven?
Well, when you do the symphony cycle a couple of times, you end up with favorites, of course. But every time you play Beethoven 9, it's just like it. There's no other way. It's just an amazing piece. But what's nice when you repeat those symphonies is with different conductors is that it is quite astounding how different the interpretations can be. For example, my favorites now, before the cycles, it used to be number 5 and maybe 9, and now it's number 2 and number 6, and so it especially the early ones are just remarkable symphonies. I don't think it's possible to get bored of them, especially if you play them with different conductors.
And what do you think Miguel's going to do with this third?
Well, I've heard rumors that he likes to keep it going, which is fantastic. In fact, so did Edo, especially the third symphony. It's because it's the first really big symphony, really. It tends to be quite often played as such, so it becomes a very, very long journey. And I think especially the slow movement, which is a stunning movement, Funeral March, but I think that, again, it's quite interesting how keeping it going keeps it also interesting, and I think that seems to be Miguel's approach too.
It's been described as groundbreaking. What do you think? I guess it's in relationship to what else was going on at the time. It was an unusually long length. It's very technically challenging. It seems to be a bit uncompromising in its aesthetic.
It is wonderful, and it is actually as you say, it's challenging because it is a big symphony. So what you said earlier about the context, what was happening, but also what he had written before, the second symphony compared to the third, it's totally something new. Even just the way it starts, it's just like a slap on your face. It really is, and totally new approach. And I think people were scared of the beginning. What's going on here? In the audience. So it really was something outrageous at the time, and you can still feel it, that it was something that no one had ever written before. So for a player, it's exciting. It really is, as you said earlier, groundbreaking. It totally something new. And then after that, it's just opened completely new ways to write.
I was speaking with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra's Concertmaster Vesa-Matti Leppänen and their music librarian, Chris Turner. I'm Clarissa Dunn. You're listening to the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra concert Eroica. While Beethoven's first and second symphonies pushed symphonic form further than Haydn or Mozart, it took Beethoven some time to become Beethoven's symphonic master. It was in the third symphony, known as Eroica, that we're about to hear, that Beethoven really stamped his individuality on the genre. After this powerful, liberating and heroic work, the symphony was changed forever, both in scale and in seriousness of content. Initially, Beethoven dedicated the symphony to Napoleon Bonaparte, but when he heard the military hero had declared himself emperor, he flew into a rage and crossed out the dedication with such fury that the pen ripped through the paper. In Beethoven's eyes, his hero had become a tyrant, a mere mortal after all. It's not surprising that Beethoven was disillusioned. Napoleon had been regarded as a symbol of revolutionary idealism. He was a hero not only to the oppressed and downcast in society, but to artists as well. And Beethoven was deliberately embracing revolutionary ideas in music. He remarked to his friend Carl Czerny that he was dissatisfied with his earlier works and that in this symphony he wished to embark on a new path. And he most definitely did that. The two opening chords are a call to attention, almost as if Beethoven is saying, "Listen, I have something important to tell you here." The first movement is lengthy, surpassing the duration of most other works up until this point. There's one strikingly original gesture after another. The second movement is described as the funeral march of a hero. It's intense, with an impassioned double fugue. Here, he's not really burying Bonaparte, but the classical style and music. The scherzo third movement scurries energetically along with a particularly rough humour, and the finale continues the humour, but this time stretches it into the sublime. And here to conduct the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra's performance of Beethoven's Symphony No. 3, Eroica, is Miguel Harth-Bedoya. Beethoven's Symphony No. 3, performed by the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Miguel Harth-Bedoya. What an absolute joy having him back in the country. The Peruvian conductor has made a life for himself in America, so we're very grateful that he was able to return here for this concert. He said that making music with the NZSO has made the 2 weeks that he had to spend in quarantine in New Zealand all worth it. So we're glad that he was able to make it here and to conduct this concert, which was postponed from 2 weeks ago. Today, in level 1 COVID restrictions, we're here in the Michael Fowler Centre with a live audience, which of course makes everything so much better. The other advantage to having Miguel in the country for a little bit longer is that they're able to show him the sights of the capital city. Miguel pointing out members of the orchestra and thanking them for their efforts in that gargantuan symphony, Beethoven's Eroica. One special performer among them tonight is retiring. New Zealand Symphony Orchestra violinist Lucien Rizos. He retires after this performance. He spent more than 46 years playing in this orchestra. I saw him backstage earlier and he was joking that one of the most satisfying moments of his orchestral life was bowling principal cellist Andrew Joyce out on the first ball in a game of cricket just after the English musician had joined the orchestra. Lucien also said that as an orchestral musician, he's lived for those extraordinary musical moments, of which there are only ever a handful in a career. One of those for him was performing with the Russian violinist Boris Belkin, whose playing, he said, blazed with blind fury. I'm sure you will join me in wishing Lucien Rizos well for his retirement. Miguel asking the entire orchestra now to stand. How lovely for them all to have had an audience here today. It does make a big difference to how they feel about their performance and how I feel about the performance too. Gives everyone in the room so much more energy. And thank you to the concertmaster tonight, Donald Armstrong, who stepped in while Vesa-Matti Leppänen was shining in the sun as soloist in the Sibelius. Well, that brings us to the end of this New Zealand Symphony Orchestra concert, Eroica. I'm Clarissa Dunn from all of us here at the Michael Fowler Centre. Noho iho rā. Stay well.